Back in May, the Winnipeg Symphony Orchestra announced Dr. Naomi Wu as their new assistant conductor, the third conducting position on the roster. In addition to her duties with the WSO, Dr. Wu will be conducting the University of Manitoba's Symphony Orchestra and director of Systema Winnipeg. I'm excited to say that Dr. Naomi Wu has joined me in the studio this morning. Welcome to Classic 107.
Good morning.
Oh, it's such a pleasure to have you here. And let me congratulate you on your first performance with the WSO this past weekend.
Thank you so much. It was a blast. For anyone who saw it, Will from Will's Jams is an absolute riot, and we had so much fun on stage.
Well, that's exactly what I wanted to ask. I mean, I wasn't there. Was it a jam?
Absolutely.
Yeah, 10 out of 10 jam.
Will's daughter even came up on stage and sang a little duo with him.
Oh, that sounds so adorable. Well, talk about a great way to start your tenure as assistant conductor of the WSO. Can you tell us a little bit more about that role?
Well, what I say in some of my pre-concert chats is that one of the roles of an assistant conductor is to take account of the fact that concert halls are really big, and the music might sound different from on the stage than it does from the first row of the concert hall, from the back of the concert hall, and from way up on the top of the second balcony. So one of the things I do in preparation for our Masterworks concerts is run around the hall a little bit and be Daniel's ears in the space.
Oh, that's so wild. I mean, it's something that you think of. I mean, I've sat in, I think, every part of our concert hall, and there's definitely different sounds depending on where you're sitting, but it is one of those things where the conductor can't be everywhere.
Exactly.
So you offer this kind of athletic pursuit as well as some musical knowledge as well. I mean, that is really, really cool. So when the WSO announced that you would be assuming the post, they spoke of your interdisciplinary approach to performance and scholarship, which has captivated audiences in Canada, the United States, and Europe. For those who can't see you, you're kind of chuckling along here. Before we get talking about the interdisciplinary part, I want to talk about Canada, the United States, and Europe.
Sure.
You were born in St. John's, Newfoundland, is that right?
I was.
And then raised in Vancouver. You went on to do a double major in mathematics and philosophy at Yale before doing a music degree and master's from Yale and a PhD from the University of Cambridge in England. Congrats on finishing that, by the
Thank
way.
you. You're better at reciting all these than I am.
Yeah, don't worry, I practiced before you came in. So Canada, the US, and Europe, all there in your education, all very different places. Does each motivate you in a different way or somehow reflect in your musical outlook?
I mean, the first thing I would say is that I am so excited to be back in Canada now for the first time in quite a number of years that I'm really relocating back here. I did live in Montreal for a year, about 5 years ago. But other than that, this is the first time in over a decade. And I feel really lucky to have a job back here in Canada, and also excited to be getting to know the Canadian musical scene again, because it's something I've always felt very strongly connected to. And actually, I would say that while I was abroad, one of the things I often prioritized was introducing people to Canadian performers, Canadian conductors, Canadian composers even. So I would say that actually it's a little bit more of a mix. And I think the thing that I do bring from these experiences in the US and in the UK is this sort of interdisciplinary education that I've had that's been quite unusual, where as you mentioned, I studied mathematics and philosophy in undergrad, and I've just finished a PhD in musicology. So it wasn't a performance PhD per se, but actually I was able to have quite a special opportunity to be doing academic research while also conducting, while also performing, and actually combining those things together. Well,
that's exactly what I wanted to ask you about, is how are all of them connected? I mean, from mathematics and philosophy to conducting and a PhD in musicology, is there one kind of thread that binds them all that you see?
My PhD was on the idea of the impossible, on composers who push the limits of the human body, try to accomplish impossible things on stage. And I was really inspired by a quote from John Cage, who said the reason he wrote impossible music is because he thought if performers could do impossible things on stage, then maybe we might be inspired to accomplish impossible tasks in the political and social world.
Wow. Yeah.
And that's definitely a thread that runs through these things for me. This was what my research was about. I think I first was excited by the idea of impossible things from mathematics and philosophy, from mathematical paradoxes. And I think in performance, this is always what we are doing. And this is what we are always doing in our teaching. We are always trying to go beyond what we previously thought we were capable of. And who among us hasn't had the experience of one day doing something and thinking, wow, a year ago, I had no idea I would be able to do that.
Yeah, we're all on a journey, and we're all trying to overcome that next hurdle. And wow, that is really fascinating. I mean, to me, one of the things that struck me as well was this idea of problem solving. Whether you're leading an orchestra trying to figure out how to make someone sound their best, or if you're doing, I don't know, like a Sudoku puzzle in the morning. I do easy Sudoku puzzles at best. But, that same idea of just solving a problem, looking at something that is in front of you and figuring out, okay, what's the best way to approach this? You have captivated audiences, to go back to that quote, not only as a conductor, but also as a pianist, performances at Carnegie Hall. Perhaps Manitoba audiences saw you back in 2016. You were the second prize winner at the Eckhart Grammaté competition. When were you first inspired to pick up the baton, to make that switch from piano to conducting?
The very first moment that I imagined I might pick up a baton is when I was about 12 and I was playing as a pianist with the Vancouver Symphony Orchestra. And at the time, the assistant conductor there in Vancouver was Tanya Miller, who went on to become music director in Victoria. And I remember seeing her and meeting with her and performing and thinking, maybe I could do that. I had not seen or heard of. I hadn't seen very many orchestras before in my life, but definitely I had not seen a woman on the podium before. And so that was a moment for me. It was several years after that I actually took up formal training, but that's the moment I think back to.
Well, I read a quote where you talked about Tanya Miller and that experience, and one of the things that I wanted to touch on at least briefly is this thing we're still trying to overcome, right? And for you in your new role as director of Sistema, do you think you yourself could be an inspiration to all the other kids that you're going to be leading and introducing to music and helping better themselves?
I hope so. I think one of the really special things about Systema Winnipeg is that it is run by the Winnipeg Symphony Orchestra. There are not very many community programs of this scale and Sistema-style programs that are run by symphonies. And one of the reasons that's so special is that when we bring Sistema students to the WSO concerts, they not only recognize some of their teachers on stage, they recognize me. And to have that personal connection to the symphony is pretty special. We actually did have a few Sistema kids come on Sunday, for example, for my first concert. And that made me feel really excited to know they were in the audience. Yeah.
Oh, that really is wonderful. And I mean, Sistema is such an outstanding program, again, in partnership with the WSO and Seven Oaks and Winnipeg School Division, really focusing on inner city schools and the power of music, the ability that music has to change lives. So really hoping you take it to the next level, because it really is such an outstanding program.
Don't tell the symphony players this, but it might be the most fun part.
Nice. Okay, I won't pass it along. Maybe one of them's listening, but we'll pretend not. And then the last thing I want to touch on is your role with the UMSO, the University of Manitoba Symphony Orchestra. You guys have a concert coming up tonight.
We do.
I know you're very passionate about new music. You were talking about introducing Canadian composers, Canadian performers, Canadian works. This concert is in the olden style.
That's right.
Maybe not new, but what can you tell us about it?
Well, it's a little bit unusual in the olden style because it is not just older music, but it's thinking about composers who themselves were thinking about the past. So if we're going to think about the past, why don't we think about how previous composers did? So it's a real mix of composers, different nationalities, different eras. We start with Grieg's Holberg Suite. The Holberg Suite, called so because Holberg was the I'm told in the score, the Norwegian Moliere. But when one said in Holberg's time, one meant in the olden days. So that's why he called the suite in Holberg's time. And it has very much Baroque influences, lots of sort of dense-like suites, an air that really sounds like Bach almost. Then we move to Schubert Symphony No. 5. I love this symphony. It's Schubert's smallest symphony. No clarinets, no timpani, no trumpet. Sorry, guys. But it's really compact and very Mozartian. And there's a wonderful quote from Schubert's diary that people always love to bring up where he'd actually at the time he was writing this symphony, written in his diary, like, oh, Mozart, how much he admired Mozart, how much Mozart was an inspiration for him. So that Schubert closes the program. And the Grieg and the Schubert, they're reflecting on very different styles, very different forces. Grieg is just for strings, but they both have a kind of sincerity to them. There's a kind of earnestness with which they're really looking at the past. So we break that up with In Between, Prokofiev's classical symphony, his very first symphony, Symphony number 1. And he's also thinking about the classical era. He puts it in the title, but there's definitely more than a twinkle in Prokofiev's eye while he's doing this. It'll be chugging along, and you're half confused. Is this Haydn or is this Prokofiev? And then he'll just, bam, throw something at you that's a little bit too loud or a little bit too dissonant.
A little bit not too Papa Haydn.
Yeah. Exactly. But taking after Haydn in the sense that it is really funny.
Yeah.
It is a very funny piece.
It sounds like an outstanding program. I hope you have a great show tonight.
Thank you.
Thank you for taking the time this morning to come by Classic 107. It's a pleasure to meet you.
Lovely to meet you.
Well, hopefully we'll have you back soon.
I hope so.
Dr. Naomi Wu is the University of Manitoba Symphony Orchestra conductor in tonight's concert in the olden style, 7:30 p.m., Westminster United Church. Tickets, just $15, $5 if you're a student. Make sure you go. You can hear this piece of music there.